What's this doohickey?
It's a brassiere. You know about those things. You're a big boy now.
I've never run across one like that.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another classic movie review, and I'm so excited to be talking about this movie today because it is one of the greatest movies of all time. That's not just a personal recommendation, it is considered one of the greatest movies of all time on many of those great movie of all time lists out there, and I feel like regardless of your background or what your tastes are, you can agree that this movie is just a piece of artwork. And so without further introduction, the movie is Vertigo, the 1958 film noir by Alfred Hitchcock, starring Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak.
I want you to follow my wife. I'm afraid some harm may come to her.
I'm supposed to be retired. I don't want to get mixed up in this darn thing. I have acrophobia, which gives me vertigo, and I get dizzy.
Do you believe that someone out of the past, someone dead, can enter and take possession of a living being?
Carlotta Valdez was what? Your wife's grandmother?
Great-grandmother.
That explains it. Yeah, anyone could become obsessed with the past. Has this ever happened to you before?
Listen, what is this? What do you want?
Just want to know who you are.
Does that remind you of her?
One final thing I have to do. Then I'll be free of the past.
Now, my experience with Jimmy Stewart prior to Vertigo was very, very inexperienced. I had only seen him in Harvey, you know, that movie where he talks to the invisible rabbit, and A Philadelphia Story, which is a really campy comedy starring Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. And also, unbeknownst to me at the time of having watched it, he was also in 50 Goes West. Yes. Jimmy Stewart was in 50 Goes West, which is an animated movie, and I love this movie, but he played this really goofy, sleepy hound dog.
Intimidate someone, give them the lazy eye.
So yeah, my experience with Jimmy Stewart before Vertigo was very limited, so I went into this movie not really knowing what to expect, and his performance is just phenomenal in this movie. He's downright scary in some parts. He gives you like the shivers, or in a good way, the sort of shivers where you get where someone is just that aggressive and intense. No, he's fantastic in this movie. And Kim Novak as well is just absolutely, it's amazing what she does in the film because she essentially has to play two different characters and she plays them both very well, very differently. And so you have to applaud her for that. But yeah, the acting in this movie alone should be a reason for you to watch it if you haven't seen it yet. But I'm going to briefly talk about the story. I don't want to spoil anything because it is an Alfred Hitchcock movie. There is a twist. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't want to ruin that for you, but I want to heavily recommend this movie. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the story without any spoilers, so you don't have to worry about that. Vertigo is set in 1950s San Francisco, and the movie features Scotty Ferguson, played by Jimmy Stewart, who is a retired police detective, and he is hired by an old classmate to investigate the odd behavior of his wife, Madeline, played by Kim Novak. Scotty finds out that there is a lot more to Madeline than meets the eye. There's something really odd going on. She visits different memorial sites or different places of interest involving an ancestor of hers, who unfortunately died under very sad circumstances. And Scotty goes from being this paid private investigator to this man who deeply cares about Madeline's well-being and really wants to try and help her. And out of this mystery, because the audience is finding out things as Scotty is too, as the audience figures out what's going on and is brought into this mystery, this love story develops, and I did not at all expect a love story from this movie that you think is just going to be a thriller. It is Alfred Hitchcock though, and he does like to have his love stories. Alfred Hitchcock worked with Edith Head, who was the fashion designer of Hollywood at the time. And you might recognize her if you're a millennial like me. You might recognize Edith Head. Your first version of Edith Head was Edna from The Incredibles, whom she was based on. But Edith Head and Alfred Hitchcock worked with color in the movie, and color is very significant in the film. And there's some really beautiful shots. If you watch it, you can pay attention to these, or if you rewatch it, you can look for even more uses of color than the ones I'm mentioning here. But there's this scene where Madeline is in a red robe, red, sort of like, you know, when ladies wear red, it's supposed to make them more desirable or something. But she's in this red robe, and Scotty's in this green sweater, and he's sort of looking at her and longing after her, green, like green with desire. And then in another scene in the movie, Madeline is basked in this, her silhouette is basked with this green light in the background, and it just reaffirms that whole him wanting her. When those feelings come up for him, the color green is there. So I love things like that because it's so symbolic, but it doesn't have to be pretentious about it. It's just something that adds to the beauty of the film, and the film, of course, in that gorgeous Technicolor. I love that Technicolor palette. It's so bright and vibrant, and so this movie has a lot of different colors, and it's just, like I said, it's a beautiful piece of artwork to look at. Now, we've talked about the movie, we've talked about the story, what it looks like, gorgeous, beautiful. We have to talk about the music, because the music of this film is so incredibly haunting, and it is, I've never heard a soundtrack that so greatly fits the movie, not only as a good backdrop, but as to the emotions and what's going on, as the Vertigo soundtrack. So the soundtrack was composed by Bernard Herrmann, and it is so perfect for the subject of the movie. Vertigo, which means the sensation of spinning, you feel dizzy. You can hear the circular, sort of dreamlike dizziness of the soundtrack without it being it's not in an unpleasant way to listen to where you think dizziness would sound like. It just sounds like Scotty is falling in love with Madeline. He is spiraling into this obsession with her, and the music so properly conveys that, and in different states too, because you have the theme song that sort of sounds like it's a little sneaky and you don't know what's going on, and then you have the love song, Scene d'Amour, which I love this scene, by the way, because it has a fantastic kiss. I'm big on kisses in movies. Actually, I want to do a movie that just has best classic movie kisses of all time, because Vertigo is definitely on that list. But there's a scene where Scotty and Madeline are kissing, and the music sounds like it's spiraling, and the room is actually physically revolving. The soundtrack for this movie is just fantastic, and I think it can definitely stand out alone, apart from Vertigo, as its own little piece of artwork. I've listened to the soundtrack driving to work just because it's beautiful on its own. I don't have to watch the movie to listen to the soundtrack. So yeah, I had to talk a little bit about that, because if you like good music, then this soundtrack is something you have to check out. Now, if you haven't seen Vertigo, you have undoubtedly at least seen a technique that was developed for Vertigo, which is the dolly zoom technique, and it was developed by a cameraman working on the movie, and it's when the camera simultaneously pulls away or draws in while expanding the field of view. So this was done really quickly as Scotty was ascending the bell tower to make it seem like the bell tower is that much taller, that much quicker, and it's such a cool effect that I've seen multiple times. And to think that it was just invented by a cameraman that was working on the film. Some poor nameless cameraman. I'm sorry. If I had better researched and found out your name, I would definitely plug it for you right here. But I just think it's so neat, because watching the classic movies and seeing the special effects and things that they were doing with the camera tricks, and it's just so much more impressive to me, I guess, than the CGI stuff. not to be a snob about it, but it is really neat to see something like that, just a simple little trick that was invented for this film to have that sort of impact on cinematography henceforward. So yeah, if you've seen the dolly zoom technique, this is the movie that invented it. So on to the weird trivia part of the review that I like to include because I think it's fun to kind of find out things that were going on about the movie or some fun trivia about it. But Vertigo was one of the 5 forbidden films, which were Alfred Hitchcock movies that were taken out of circulation for a number of years. So Vertigo, Psycho, Rear Window, The Man Who Knew Too Much, and The Trouble with Harry. After 8 years of their release in the theater, ownership would go back to Hitchcock, and that was due to a clause that his agent had drafted. It was a very unusual clause. So Hitchcock pulled these movies out of circulation. No one could watch them. Even poor Jimmy Stewart was denied a request to have a clip of Vertigo that he wanted to show at an appreciation award ceremony for him. So yeah, Hitchcock did not budge. No one could get these films. So after Vertigo had been in theaters or out in circulation for 8 years, it was gone until 1980 when Hitchcock died. Universal Pictures started negotiations to buy these 5 forbidden films from his estate. And thankfully they did that. Now, it was a financially successful move on their part, but just the value that they gave back to people who weren't around in 1958 and didn't get to watch Vertigo in theaters. We get to watch it because thankfully someone had the common sense to make sure that these films weren't forever forgotten. I've recommended classic movies to people to try and start them in this genre. People who think, oh, classic movies are boring, they're not interesting. Vertigo is always one of the movies that I recommend to them because you will see when watching, it's very exciting and you don't know what's going on. The twist is fantastic. The characters are wonderful. You get to see Midge get horribly friend-zoned by Scotty and it's just so painful to watch.
Oh, it's not funny, Midge.
Johnny?
No.
Johnny, I just thought...
But this movie is so enjoyable. I cannot recommend it enough. If you love thrillers, if you love mysteries, if you love romance movies, it's got it all. So grab someone, if they haven't seen Vertigo, and introduce them to this film or rewatch it yourself and post something interesting that you saw about the movie. I hope you liked my review, and I will see you next time when I want to talk about American Graffiti, which may not be considered a classic movie, but I really want to talk about that film because it is interesting. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time and have a good week. I hope everyone's staying safe amidst all of the corona stuff out there. So okay, talk to you later. Bye.